And there was a real loss of identity there that was really scary for me, because I'd learned to just be what I was doing. And it's from that place I see, I have no blame in this space. I have a lot of compassion for anyone who's still in that place, because I was there, and I get how easily it's done. How can I judge anyone for living that way when I did it for so long, and I know how easy it is.
This audio recording is an extension of the community explorations at inlightconnect.com, where we explore self-inquiry, meditation, and conscious observation as a way of connecting with more love, compassion, and freedom. Welcome to the Inlight Connect Community Explorations podcast. This is Tiger. I'll be your host as we journey through a profound exploration into the nature of self and reality. I am super stoked about my guest today. We met on Clubhouse, and he was one of the first people that I really appreciated hearing what came out of their mouth. And since then, I followed him on Clubhouse and kind of followed him around to these other rooms, which connected me to a lot of other cool people. So super cool. My guest today is Ben Bidwell. He's also known as the Naked Professor. And Ben, I want to welcome you and thank you so much for taking the time to connect with me here. And I would love for you to just tell people a little bit about what you do.
Firstly, Tiger, it's my honor, honestly, your message inspires me, as I say to you every time. So it's really just my pleasure to sit in this space with you. My story is that I guess I've lived two very separate lives. I've lived my first 30 years, which was very much dictated to by society and who I felt I should be, which was a man, someone who thought he should be strong and tough and unemotional and brave and all the kind of stereotypical perceptions that the world has. And then 9 years, which is the next 9 years, which has been a journey of self-exploratory, a bit of a deep dive into actually who I really am, not who I learned to be, but actually who am I really. And that's been a bit of a crazy journey that's been full of, challenges, learning the truths, learning actually, that perhaps I'm very different to the person that I was living as, and having to let go of kind of my ego's stance or grip on how people perceive me, and that's friendships and work colleagues and a lot of family. People bracketed me as a certain type of person, and over the last 9 years I've become someone who's very, very different, and that's led me into coaching and wanting to help other people to go on a similar journey, if you like, to discover who they really are. Because if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, you can tick all the boxes you want in society, but until you really live true to actually who you really are, there's always going to be something missing inside. And that's what I want to help people do is find out how to itch that scratch, truly.
That is super cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I love is it just really speaks to this human journey of letting go of the world and coming home to the heart. And that can be quite a scary thing. And it's super appropriate for the title of this conversation, which is the courage to be strong in your vulnerability. And I'll have to say that it's the thing that really drew me to you was listening to you speak. And I could just, beyond any pretense, recognize, oh, this is a man that's not hiding. He is totally comfortable just being open and vulnerable and embracing the reality of his humanness. And for me, this is such a celebration when we can look at ourselves and other people and really honor the human rather than seeking the image of what it might be to be strong or to be a man, but to really come to this place of vulnerability that says, nope, I'm not that. Mm-hmm. Here I am in all my colors. And then also you focus, from what I understand, a lot on vulnerability. And in your experience, can you tell me a little bit about what is the strength for you in vulnerability?
For sure, yeah. I mean, it does require strength, doesn't it? I don't think it always I mean, for me now, being vulnerable doesn't require strength, if I'm honest, a lot of the time, because it's my natural path. I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's just an uncovering of my truth. But of course, our truth is always, to begin with, perhaps is very different to people's perceptions, and our ego is clinging on to be this way. This is the person that will be accepted. This is the person who is validated. Don't be this person who you really feel, like in my case, this kind, soft, sensitive, open, loving man. Don't be that, because society will reward you better if you can be all the other stereotypical things. So there's an element of vulnerability there in exposing my truth, because I'm judged for that truth. Perhaps some people might be like, what is going on with that guy, Ben? I used to be in Vegas with him at this place and that place, and now he's talking about love, and now he's talking about sensitivity, and now he's talking about how he's not feeling so great, and now he's talking about all this stuff. And it's like, that's not the guy I know. And that's a threat, to our ego, or to my ego. So it requires vulnerability in that you're going to be judged, or some people are going to judge you in the world that we live in for seeing you in a different way, wondering what the hell's going on with you. And we're taught in society not to come from our hearts. I believe we're taught by society to come from our egos, we'll come from our conditioning. So it's a vulnerable act to let our hearts be felt, particularly for us men sitting in this space, Tiger. I think this is the easier thing as a man is to go to the pub and drink 5 pints and talk about the football. Then you're accepted, then it's common. Then it's like, yeah, we're a man. It's not so easy to talk about how we're truly feeling, what's really going on in our lives. That perhaps there are challenges that we're facing, or there are obstacles, or that perhaps we're not the person that we once were. So that's why it's vulnerability. There's a possibility of judgment, and that's tough.
I love that though. See, and oh my God, we're going to get into so many amazing things here. But there's something that you said that I think is super profound and is a great encouragement for people. And that is, you said that it's no longer necessary for courage because it's an integrated experience. And this is reflective of my experience in doing what I do, in sharing freely. And a lot of times people might say, wow, you're so courageous following your heart. But for me, there's no courage in it at all. It's like, no, this is just what's happening. And it's important to see that courage is only necessary when fear is perceived. And when you see that there's nothing to fear, then courage isn't necessary. And so oftentimes we think, oh man, I have to, fight this battle of fear for the rest of my life, not realizing, no, courage is just like initially to look at the fear and see what you're afraid of. And then eventually you see that there's nothing to be afraid of. And then there's no more courage necessary. And so it doesn't have to be this constant battle per se. It's just the initial investigation into the matter at hand, where we get to see beyond the fear. And for me, that's the fun part, is as you travel this journey, you constantly run into these things that you fear. And then with that initial courage to look at it, you realize, oh, I don't have to fear this, and I don't have to fear that, and I don't have to fear that. And so it's like these walls of fear get softly laid down, and you find out there's more to love. And as you're speaking to the courage to be vulnerable, you addressed the things that so many of us are afraid of, which is how other people perceive us, the fear of being rejected, the fear of not getting the acceptance, and the fear of losing the image that we have been taught to hold up in front of society in hopes that we could finally fit in. And I would like to just kind of explore this real life struggle of kind of separating ourselves from vulnerability in hopes that we can capture the image, that hopes we can finally be this person that other people want us to be. And all the while, we're kind of murdering our own heart. And so if you could kind of share your experience of coming into the heart and how that feels in contrast from kind of denying it.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to say in before we get into that is just that the thing for me that really is most scary of all now is to lose connection with my heart. Because once I connect with, once we go on that journey and we become, and we see our truth and we feel our truth, and we feel, for me, the language is a sense of alignment in being who I really am. The one thing that hurts me more than anything is not being myself anymore. And that's a massive driver for me now in that sense. And I know it's a cliche, but the only thing to fear is fear itself in that respect. I don't want to be living in a place of fear where I'm not aligned. That makes sense. That's my fear.
Well, yeah, but you say something interesting there, which is that's the greatest pain, is kind of abandoning my own heart. And I think that we feel that pain in the world, but we think it's because of what's going on in the world. But really, we're just abandoning our heart. And it seems like for you, there's been the recognition of where the pain is really at, rather than projecting it into the world. That's super beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. And that takes some work, right? Because you're totally right. It's understanding where our pain is coming from. And that's been a massive part of the journey for me, and understanding, is this pain created because my ego is not feeling accepted? And is it because I'm losing myself? Where does the pain exist? Like, my heart is in pain when I'm out of alignment.
It's like, is this pain because I'm being rejected, or is it because I'm wanting to be accepted?
Yeah, exactly.
And if I'm wanting to be accepted, I'm abandoning my heart.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Because for me, my heart wants nothing more than just to be expressed, just to be allowed, just to express my truth. That's all my heart craves in this moment. It has no other agenda for me. And that gives a lot of freedom. I mean, it's not always as easy as that, of course, but I'm with it comes an awareness to make choices that truly serve me. So I try not to go places where there is a real danger that I will lose myself, because sometimes that's hard. And sometimes there's no avoiding losing yourself if, I don't know, maybe that's not true, but you really have to be strong in some cases to really stick to your truth if everyone else around you is falling into a different space.
Well, where does that strength come from for you, Ben?
I think it's integrity. It's a relationship with my heart. It's choosing my heart. It's just making that choice. I love the quote that says, come from love, not for love. And I believe my heart comes from love, and it's just making a simple choice to listen to my heart, not to listen to my thoughts. And I try and differentiate between those two, in that my ego speaks to me as thoughts and as thinking that I hear bouncing around my head that tells me, Ben, you should do this, and Ben, you need to fit in, or Ben, they don't like you, or Ben, all those stories. Whereas my heart is just a knowing. It's just a truth inside of me that doesn't bounce around with these thoughts of shoulds. It just knows.
Man, I love this so much. It's what I hear, and in your own way, and I'd like to get into the journey of it, but in your own way, it's like you chase things in the world thinking you wanted them, but then you kind of saw through that illusion of what you really wanted. And then the sort of strength is in understanding what you really want beyond the illusion. It's like, wait, I've played with this illusion before, and it ultimately separated me from my heart. And so what do I really want here? Do I want the illusion that I know is ultimately empty and fleeting? Or do I want what's true, what's always there, and what actually supports what I am, speaking to the integrity? And so clearly, as you've said, you've had this journey of, running around in the world trying to capture something and having it slip through your fingers, ultimately discovering what you really want. Was there any sort of spiritual journey in a traditional sense that helped you on that path?
I think I would wonder if I would ever have got there without meditation, because meditation was the place that led me into my heart to begin with, at the very beginning of the journey. That was my place of self-discovery, if you like. Before that, I had no idea. I couldn't differentiate between what was my ego, what was my conditioning, what was I taught to be, as opposed to who am I really. And I think we need silence for that. Mm-hmm. And that's what meditation gave me, some truth as to who I really, really was, but also some guidance with that as well. I did some meditation in silence for a long time, where I had a mantra, and it just I never got to the place until I actually went on a retreat, and I sat in a space with men, and there was a lot of guidance, and then there was silence. So we were kind of led to a journey, and then it's now go within yourself. You've been led to this place. What are you finding now? And that was where I started to discover my heart. And it was there, it's starting to learn that, fundamental, like really stripping all of this back, in terms of what do I really want? There's one thing that seems to be like more permanent, as opposed to all the other stuff that I've ever done in my life or chased in my life that seemed to be fleeting. However much I wanted it, it never sort of sat deeply with me. And that one thing for me was this concept of love that can shape so many different areas, or show up in so many different areas. And this was I came from a place of the first 30 years of my life rejecting love, not wanting anything to do with love, thinking love was not for me. Just it wasn't my way. I couldn't tell my mum I loved her, and I knew I loved her. I had so much love for her, but I couldn't share it. I couldn't allow it. I couldn't let her know that.
Can you tell me why?
Yeah, because my ego had learned that was unsafe, that I'd be judged, that my older brothers would think I was weak.
Unsafe.
Yeah.
Unsafe.
Yeah.
I think that's so profound and so resonant for so many people, where we feel like it is unsafe to love. And when we get honest, we realize we do crave it, but at the same time we don't, because we think it's unsafe. And I think that speaks to a misunderstanding about what love is and where love comes from. And often when we think that love comes from the outside, then we can lose it. And in that loss, we experience the suffering and the pain. And so we think it's unsafe. But the more you start to recognize that, as you said in that quote, the love doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside of you. And so it is very safe.
Yeah.
It's actually the safest space when you realize that it's the source of what you are, so to speak, because nobody can ever take it from you.
No.
My God, it's just so beautiful.
But it's almost the opposite to it was the opposite to what I learned.
Yeah.
The world showed me, go chase, go consume. That's where your happiness lies. I remember in the early stages of my journey working with a coach, and I remember her telling me, but leading me to the space, saying, Ben, money won't bring you happiness. And I remember laughing in her face, thinking, I know when I buy something, it makes me happy. Yeah. And it was at that point that actually, depending on your interpretation of the language, that we were both right in some ways. There's no doubt if I buy something, it can make me happy in that moment. But for me, in the terms of my understanding of the language, it doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't fill me up in the inside. It just gives me a fleeting moment of enjoyment, of happiness. But that happiness can go in a second if I get a phone call saying some bad news. Instantly it's changed. Whereas the sense of fulfillment for me that lies deeper, and it is all down to our interpretation of the language, but for me is whether I'm having a good day or a bad day, whether I'm eating that cake that's beautiful and tastes really nice, or if I'm having an awful day that everything around me is going wrong, that level of relationship, of connection to love is way more permanent. And if I've got that level of love and connection to that level of love and relationship with myself, then the good days and the bad days will just come and go as they do naturally unfold in the world. But how I feel about myself is more permanent. What my connection to love is more permanent within me.
Yeah. And I love how we're kind of taught that happiness is through acquisition.
Yeah.
That we need to go out in the world and make it a certain way if we are going to be happy. And so many people I come across in my journey doing what I do have all played this game, whether it's, getting the right family, the right relationship, the right amount of money, the right status, the right amount of followers. No matter what the outcome was, there's still that sort of emptiness where there's a self-hatred, where it's like, man, no matter how many people love me, it doesn't seem to matter at all. And it kind of destroys the illusion that we've been taught that it's important for you to fit in. And my goodness, and I'm going to circle back on something that I already said, but it speaks to that illusion that says what I want is in the world. And it's funny because if I want something in the world, then I can't be myself. It's not safe to be myself because then I might not get it. And again, this speaks back to the vulnerability. It's not safe to be vulnerable. It's not safe to be authentic. It's not safe to be sincere because I might not get what I want. And I think that my wholeness or even my happiness exists in what I want. And so naturally, this is also the illusion that's been spoken about in all of spirituality, is seeing beyond this facade that you get anything in this life from the world. And it's funny because when you look at the nature of happiness and wanting, and this could be a whole nother topic, but when you get something and you feel good, I'd suggest that you feel good because you're done wanting. But as soon as you realize that that's not really the source, then you start looking for something else to want. And so it feels good to want, not because you got, but because you're done wanting. That's what feels good, because now I don't have to run around anymore. But when you connect with the truth of what you are in recognizing that you are actually whole and you're not missing anything and there's nothing in the world that can complete you, then the want disappears. You see this? And then you don't need to chase. You don't need to run away from the present moment. And for me, that's the fulfillment. It's not a fulfillment because of something happens or because I get something. It's because I realize I don't want anything. And because of that, I can come back to the present moment and just be with what's showing. Although it certainly doesn't look as eloquent as I'm speaking about it. but that's ultimately the conclusion I come to, is like, wait a minute, I think I want something. And then I investigate it, and it just brings me back to this place of realizing, oh, I don't want that. I'm just scared. I'm scared of not protecting my ego. I'm scared of what other people are going to think. Again, pointing back to the wanting. I want to be approved of. I want to be seen a certain way. And as I see through that illusion, I just come home into the heart and realize a wellness. But yeah, man, super, super beautiful.
And the thing with that as well is, I think from that space, you empower yourself to choose your wants. You know, you're not reliant on them anymore. You've got something beneath them that means you're fine without them anyway. You know, you're beyond fine. You're complete without them. So from that space, you can make empowered choices about things that really inspire you, not out of desperation, out of need, because without them, you're empty. Without them, you're searching. Without them, you're not conforming to society's perception that you should be happy all the time.
Yeah, you're not trying to get something from it.
No.
It's almost like more of a sharing of what you are rather than trying to complete what you are.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to complete what you are, then clearly you see yourself as not enough in this moment. Clearly you see yourself as missing something, which makes it impossible to be present. But I distinguish the difference in that between wanting and enjoying, where it's like, rather than saying I want that, I say I could enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I lend myself to it and I can move in that direction, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. And for me, that's so much more fun. And have you had the experience where in going after what you want, you find out it's not really what you wanted?
Of course, I still do. You know, it comes up all the time. And you're like, how many times am I going to fall for this?
Yes. And this teaches me not to trust my mind.
Oh God, yeah.
It's like, no matter what my mind says I want, it's like I've played this game. And it's funny because even before COVID, I was living in Portugal and I was kind of doing a bunch of work, setting up retreats to be able to do all around the world. And things weren't really moving how I wanted them to move. And I got frustrated. And now that we're in lockdown, it's like, oh, well, I'm glad that didn't work out. I would have spent a bunch of resources and whatnot setting stuff up that I eventually would have canceled. So it's like, you know what? It looks like life knew exactly what it was doing. And so I can embrace that and just kind of trust whatever's showing.
Yes. Yeah, I totally hear you. And it's so often the way, isn't it? I think when you put your trust into the universe, however you want to describe it, your trust into the flow of life, then so often, well, you'll always find in one way or the other that there was a lesson that led you to the place you're in now.
Okay, Ben, I got a question for you, which I know people are going to ask listening. If there's nothing to get in the world to complete myself, then what's the point? Why are you even here?
Well, I want to answer intuitively into this, and what comes to me immediately, and it so often comes to me, but I always look at dogs because they're such pure animals. They're for me, they're so driven by their hearts. Now, dogs don't have a purpose. They're not judging themselves on the existence of what they've achieved and what they've done every day. They just live in this flow of the moment every day and live this beautiful existence of just loving everything that they come across with curiosity and excitement, and then it ends and they've had a beautiful journey. And I think we've become fixated almost as human beings that, our whole existence is determined by what's sort of concrete, by what's put on our tombstone, by what's measurable, by how successful we can be deemed. When all of that, like we said before, linking it back, is all external. For me, I know it's a cliche, but inner peace is the new success. That there's no better thing than experiencing what we can feel on the inside. That's where the beauty lies. If we can connect into that, fundamentally, what is love, then that is a beautiful existence, a beautiful journey. It's not the car that makes it the beautiful journey, or the house, or whatever it is. It's the connection to what lives inside of us. And so to answer your question, I always used to see life as a problem to be solved. It was one stress after another, constantly trying to solve it all. And life is just a game to be played in each day. We have decisions to make all the time, and my goal is just to keep trying to choose choose the energy of my heart that's present, that knows, that's in flow, that comes from love. And from there, I just trust that everything will unfold and I will live the life that I'm meant to live, and it'll be beautiful and I'll feel it.
That is super beautiful. I've got such a big smile on my face. Because especially like the example of the dog, it's like, what if the purpose of the dog is to be the dog and its purpose doesn't extend into the future? And I think that that's part of the difficulty in the human mind, is we're convinced that time exists, and we're convinced that there's something in the future that's not here right now, because we don't see the present moment clearly. And so in that, it creates the illusion that my purpose must be in the future. And so I have to go get it, which again divorces me from the present moment. Thus enter stress, anxiety, and everything else. And I find that the search for purpose is a hilarious game, because when I go out into the forest and I say, what's the purpose of the trees? Well, clearly it's for the trees to be the trees. What's the purpose of the rain? Well, the purpose is for the rain to be the rain, because all of them serve as they are, right? They're not trying to improve themselves. They're in this vast space of freedom that says, please be what you are. Not what you want to be, not what you think you should be, but be what you are, because as you are is what serves the whole. And the illustration that I often use playfully is like, the flower looks up at the tree and says, my goodness, you're so big, I wish I could be like you. And then the bird flies over and sees the flower and says, my God, you're so beautiful, I wish I could be like you. And then the tree sees the bird and wants to be able to fly. And all of them don't see what they really are. And this is the key. If you see what you really are, there's no wanting to be like anything else, because what you are is so exquisite, so beautiful, so intimately intertwined with everything. And naturally, this has been the pointer of spirituality in its most sincere sense, is come back to the present moment and see what you really are. And then you'll recognize, to use words, your divinity. And so purpose is already done. And I think that the more we recognize that it's already done, we don't need to go chase it, then we relax into a naturalness which plays. Like you said, the point is to not go get, but to be what you are and to fall into the play that's happening. And for me, that's the purpose, is to recognize and see more clearly what I really am. And in that recognition, there's this flow that just allows for the human experience.
Beautiful. Yeah. And in that, what I hear is that, the game for us all as human beings is to learn who we really are. Because that's where I think at the very beginning, so many of us are going wrong. We don't know who we are. I remember the typical advice, whenever you go for a job interview or you go on a date, and your parents or your friends or whoever it is might just say, just go and be yourself. And I remember thinking, but if I go be myself, like, I can come out with some crazy stuff, like that'd be pretty weird. And, I'll say, speaking my mind, I'll come out with all sorts of horrible things, like, is that really going to help me? And the truth is that wasn't myself. That was my conditioning. That's who I learned to be. If I really dropped into myself, and this is where I find so much comfort in it all, is that I know my true self, who I really am. There is no comparison. There is no hatred. There is no anger. That truth of who I really am is kind and compassionate. And sure, at times I have to be firm. At times, boundaries might be crossed. But in connecting to my heart and speaking my truth of who I really am, it's a very different place that can be felt very differently, as opposed to my ego that will make them wrong and express myself from a very different energy than the softness of my heart.
Let's explore that. The play of vulnerability and coming into your truth. For me, what I recognize in that is just a deep willingness to be sincere.
Yes.
It's not saying that how I see things is the truth, but more so it's an acknowledgement of what is sincere. And I think the ego can get lost in this, where the ego might say, well, this is my truth, this is the way things are, rather than a sincerity that says, this is what I'm seeing right now. This is what's true for what's being seen. And I need to honor that. And I think that that's so important, because sincerity is a doorway into the present moment. It's like the profound difference between seriousness and sincerity. For me, seriousness requires points in the future that could be lost. And so this moment is now an obstacle to protect what we fear losing. So now the moment is serious. Now, sincerity is something else entirely. Sincerity is a depth of what is true right now. It's like, what is really being seen? What is really being felt? And the more that we look at that, the more that we acknowledge it, then that brings us into the present moment. And it's not a serious thing. It's not like a fear of loss. It's like, let's just see what's true here.
Yes. Beautiful. And I guess on that, I'd love to tap into your knowledge on this, Tiger. Are you aware at your source that there is play? If we take out the fear, if we like, or the ego, at your source is someone who wants to, still a child in some ways, who wants to be just playful. Do you feel that? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But I often forget it.
Yeah, me too.
But thank God for pain, because the pain reminds me. The pain tells me when I'm taking things seriously, which is, it's also telling me that I'm making things up that aren't true.
Yeah. But
it's kind of like, the analogy I use is, if we're playing a game of Monopoly and the moment you think the money is real, you're no longer fun to play with. And that's what happens in life, is we think the points are real, right? We think the amount of followers we have is real. We think the money that we have means something, and it doesn't. It's all illusionary. And so when you see that it's all illusionary, everything becomes funny. And the person that thinks it's real doesn't like the person that thinks it's funny.
Yes.
And so I can totally have compassion, especially as I do like my live videos and stuff. They're often very playful and celebrating, the miracle of being alive. But if somebody is really struggling with something they think is real, then that playfulness can seem like it's a threat. I've actually experienced that quite a bit in past relationships, where I didn't take things seriously, but playfully.
Yes.
And that didn't go. I've had to learn to kind of see it for myself and really hold space for other people to believe in their seriousness, while in my heart knowing that it's, just a dream.
Yes. Yeah. And that's it for me, is that, my heart doesn't have judgments. It doesn't have comparison. It isn't in competition with anyone. It's just being. If we talk about just being, there is all of that stuff is in a different place. I love the phrase that says competition destroys connection.
Ooh, my goodness.
And it's so true. And connection has become my biggest driver in connecting with my heart. So do I want to compete? I mean, no, I want to express myself to my capabilities, to my truth, And if someone else does it better, then is that any reflection on me? It's the relationship with myself is based, my heart is based on me showing up and doing my thing, whether I'm good or bad at it, not because I'm winning. That's the story.
Yeah. And how often do we see examples of those who are super successful, whether it's gold medalists or whatever, and then struggle terribly,
of course,
in their own inner life, because the illusion of fame or accolades ultimately is imaginary and doesn't have anything to offer a value. But again, this is what we prize in the world. And I think it's important to understand this dynamic, that the world is celebrating imagined self-importance because everybody wants to be important. So they are celebrating the people that they think are important. Do you see that?
Cool.
And so it's a projection that's completely empty. And then we say, oh, I want to be important. And so then we try and be important and divorce ourselves from our vulnerability because that threatens the importance. It's like, no, I need to be what I see other people being. And then once I can be like them, then I'll have the prize. But what they don't see is that prize doesn't actually exist in reality. And so we're brought back to that place of emptiness where we have to be still and see what's really true, which is actually quite terrifying. And I wanted to circle back, and we are all over the place and I love it, but I want to circle back to your meditation experience. And when you first started investigating that stillness, was there anything that was terrifying for you?
I think the most terrifying thing for me was the loss of identity, the loss of, like, oh shit, sorry, excuse my language. If I'm going to be my truth, what are my family going to think of me? What are my brothers going to think of me? What are these people that I've sort of lent on as friends or had in my life as close relationships? What are they all going to make of me? Who am I? I mean, in a similar way, I remember I must have been age 29 and having a bit of a holiday romance in Ibiza, and it was going so well that it was quite clear that I was going to be in a relationship with this girl at that point. And I remember the voices coming up in my head. It's like, who are you if you're in this relationship? Because suddenly you don't have the stories to share with your friends. Suddenly you can't be telling them about how you were out partying and you met this girl and you did this and this happened and that happened. Take all that away. Who are you? And there was a real loss of identity there that was really scary for me, because I'd learned to just be what I was doing. So that was and it's from that place I see, I have no blame in this space, and no, I have a lot of compassion for anyone who's still in that place, because I was there and I get how easily it's done. How can I judge anyone for living that way when I did it for so long? And I know how easy it is. But yeah, I mean, for me now, it's, I've got to the point in the more connected I am myself to love, and the more connected I see anyone else connected to love, that's my measure, without wanting to judge them. That's what I want. That's my goal. And I was just so disconnected to love, and it was scary to go there. But my reality was that I had an understanding that, God, if I'm really going to live a fulfilling life, I'm going to have to let all of these identities go, and I'm going to have to drop into what I now know is the true source of fulfillment in my life, and I'm going to have to embrace love.
Oh my goodness. I love what you're saying in this fear of a loss of identity. I just did a video yesterday with the Enlight Connect community, and it was called Fear of What? Beyond All the Stories. And we were examining how there's only one thing that you actually fear, but we hide from it in our stories by saying, oh, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. But really, it's something much deeper. And it all points to it if you're willing to look. But it points to exactly what you're saying is, I'm afraid of losing who I think I am, which is also the loss of ego, the loss of who I am in the mind, and emptiness will destroy that because you see that it's not real. And again, this is spoken about throughout spirituality in the way that you enter heaven after you die, and this is the death of the ego. When the ego is seen through, when it's seen that it doesn't exist, then the only thing that's left is love, because it's only the ego that withholds love in order to protect itself. And like you were talking about, what you realize is that if you were going to enter the gates of heaven, you are going to have to put down your backpack full of ideas of who's right and who's wrong, what you are and what you're not, who other people are and who they're not. You had to lay all of this to rest in order to really connect with the truth of what you are. And this is so incredibly fascinating because it's such a doorway to see that, wow, the only thing I'm actually afraid of is realizing that who I think I am doesn't exist. And so the invitation in meditation or just any practice is to be present and see that. See that this person you're protecting, this person that's trying to survive, that wants to be seen and validated in the world, is actually a complete figment of imagination and doesn't serve you at all. And as you see that, which is like letting it die, not really, because it's not really alive, but in letting that die, there's a surrendering into the present moment. And that's when you tap into that love and you realize, wow, this is my real home.
Mm. I wish you could see me, because I just sit here nodding whenever you're speaking. But it's like I don't feel like I can sort of transfer enough of my agreement over to you without you without you being able to see it. But no, exactly. I guess I'd just be interested actually in, when you say it doesn't serve you at all, I'm intrigued to kind of to play with that a little, if you don't mind, because I guess where I've got to, and you'll know better than me, but my own understanding is that if I can build a healthy relationship with myself, whereby I'm in tune with my heart and I'm aware of my ego and what where it's trying to I don't know whether you said lead me astray or how it's talking to me or whatever it is, but I'm aware of my own truth beyond that, and I'm able to make a choice, a healthy choice. Is there, going back to kind of what you were saying before, and I can't remember what you said. It's rather than wanting, it's what did you say? I could enjoy. Is that your?
Yeah, I would enjoy.
Yeah, I would enjoy. I like to think that I can get to a place where I can be so content with myself that I can then just choose what I want to enjoy on top, without any fear around it or any guilt or any judgment that it's not in tune with my heart, but still aligning with my truth to know that what is right and wrong, what in terms of my own integrity. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to play, like again, going back to, for me, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with driving your Ferrari or driving or having your whatever your things are, if it's not the fact that you need them to feel, if you think you need them to feel happy, or you're getting them because they're going to make you happy. If you're already fulfilled inside and you want to add stuff on top, is it wrong to if you're fulfilling your heart to then fulfill your ego? I guess is where I'm getting to, on top, by giving it nice little treats.
Yeah, I think it really comes back to that play issue, because in the space of wholeness, it's kind of like having a blank canvas and you're a painter. You're free to paint. And that's the play of being human. You're free to experience this, that, and the other. However, does it matter? It's kind of like when you're painting, does it matter what you paint? And it only matters because you're afraid of what somebody else will think. You're afraid of someone else not liking it. And so then it becomes serious. Then it's no longer play anymore.
Mm.
And that will always come with tension. That'll always come with some sort of internal response that thinks it's a serious matter. But again, it's not wrong. It's totally allowed. It's like you are allowed to chase 10 Ferraris. You are allowed to chase anything you want to chase. You're free completely. The question is, how's it going? And then that's what brings us back to the inquiry and get really honest about what is the real issue here. Am I trying to capture something, or am I authentically enjoying something? Like, for example, before I started sharing full time, I guess, I ran a company that I started, and it did fairly well. And I went out and I bought $80,000 BMW. It was a SUV, turbo something or other, and it was super sexy. It was like the nicest car that I had ever experienced. And I was watching myself have the experience of having the car. And what I enjoyed was the recognition that this totally doesn't matter. Like, this is temporary, and so I'm just going to enjoy it right now. And then when I decided to give up my business and shut it down, and I was just going to share, I was like kind of stepping out in faith, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm done doing this. Now I'm going to share. It came to a point where it's like, well, what am I going to do with this car? And I decided to just give it back to the bank. It's like, I can't really sell it because I'm a little upside down. And so I'm just going to give it back to the bank. And I watched the whole process. And the process of, does this bother me? Kind of like seeing if there's an attachment. And it was just so easy to let it go. It's like, wow, this doesn't matter at all. And that was such a big teacher for me, because it was like, this is all so incredibly allowed. And the only thing that says it's not is some sort of judgment. And I remember also early on, like in my early 20s, man, I was so broke, busted, and disgusted. And I was wondering, how could this be? Because I'm such a nice guy. It's like, how could I be so broke and also be a decent human being? But then I also noticed that I had all of these judgments towards people who had nicer things than me. It was like, oh, well, that person has 3 cars. That's absurd. Or that person has a house with 10 bedrooms. That's absurd. Not realizing the completely relative nature of it, where somebody was looking at my 2-bedroom apartment from another part in the world and thought it was excessive because they have 5 people living in 1-bedroom places. Do you see that? You see how it's all completely relative?
Yeah.
And so in this, there's no judgment. Whether you want to experience this, that, or the other, there's just zero judgment. And the only judgment that is there is the judgment that you have, which again is ultimately a judgment that you place on top of yourself and you project it on others. And so as it relates to playing, go for it. But ultimately, do you know that it doesn't matter? Like in the way that I could die tomorrow and that's totally fine. It literally doesn't matter if I have this experience that I think I would enjoy. Does that make sense?
Of course. Yeah, I hear you. And I guess where I get to in that, I mean, I keep getting to these points thinking this is so important, this bit is so important to this bit. But what I'm wondering is how can we, and I'd love to just discuss this, how can we learn the difference between our judgments and our truth? Because that feels like a really important thing to do if we're trying to let go of judgments but live true to our truth, right?
Yeah. Well, if it's a judgment, it's not true. That's a good place to start.
But some people would be going, no, it's like, perhaps it's a judgment that I'm looking out my window and the sky is grey tonight, today, and it's, I would, someone would have to present a pretty good argument to convince me that the sky is not grey, but it is a judgment, right?
Oh, no, it's a discernment.
Ah.
It's a difference between discernment and judgment. And again, these are all silly words that can't actually say anything. So, but the discernment that the gray is sky, or the sky is gray, is actually saying that the way that I sees a gray sky. But what does the dog see?
Yeah.
Right? What does someone who's colorblind see? Probably something that's gray, but still.
So it's basically explaining what your perception is.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like looking at a cloud and we argue about what it looks like.
Yeah.
One person says it looks like a dog. No, it looks like a monster. And everyone's right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the beauty in it, is you don't have to argue about what it looks like.
Yeah.
And again, this points back to what we were saying about truth. Truth isn't in what I see. The truth is in how I see. It's like, it's true that I see it this way, but it doesn't mean that's what it is. It's like, it's true that we call this tree an oak tree, but it's not true that it's actually an oak tree. There's nothing in reality that's actually called an oak tree. The human mind just makes that up so that we can communicate with another. Same as saying that your name is Ben, but that doesn't make you something called Ben. Right? And so it's not true that you are a Ben. It's true that that's your name.
Yes. Okay, I hear you. But is there a deeper truth in terms of, is it truth that what we experience inside of us, I often refer to our truth as, that knowing that I refer to my heart as my knowing. There's a knowing inside of me that just knows.
Yeah.
Is that, I guess that's my truth rather than the truth.
Yeah. It's what's seen, and it's true that you see it, but it's also not true that it is what the mind says it is. It's kind of like, how often have you tried to communicate what is sincere and somebody totally doesn't understand what you're talking about?
Of course.
It's like what is actually true can't be captured in language. And so no matter what you say, it's not true. The truth is so much, it's so beyond anything the mind can say. This is why there's that invitation to come back to stillness and connect with what is true inside of yourself without needing anybody else to confirm it. Because once you see it for yourself, it's kind of like, once you see the truth of your nature, it doesn't matter if anybody else sees it, because you see it.
Yeah, it's your truth.
Yeah.
And it's for you to live aligned to. Yeah, I guess so. On that, and I don't want to get stuck on this, but I think it's just such a key part for us all, and it was a massive unveiling of my own journey, is learning what I'm defining as my truth as opposed to my conditioning, and I guess that's where it lies for me, is that there was, when I started learning what my judgments were that came from my conditioning, with that awareness, I was allowed myself to let go of them, or at least allow myself to stop embodying them so deeply, or, continuing to play that rhetoric. I was now in a place where it's like, okay, I hear it, it's there, but I'm not going to allow it to embody it, to become my truth, if you like, for it to approach my truth where it's that deep.
Yeah,
I'm just going to allow it to be the what it is, which is speculation in my head of a story.
You're not identifying with it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that's normally what we do as human beings, is we identify with the content in our mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, much of the things that we think we want is just a form of conditioning. It's like we've been watching commercials our whole life that have told us what we want, and we think it's our want. No, that's just conditioning. And so when you see that it's conditioning, you recognize, oh, that's not really what I am. It doesn't have to be my master, so to speak. I can watch it, and it loses all of its power. It's like, as soon as you identify with something, it becomes your master. And you really lose in experience, I guess, the connection to what you are.
What about identifying with your heart? Because I love to say that that's the place that I get to, and I'd love my heart to be not my master, I guess, but my guide. Because for me, the space of, or the sense of fulfillment comes from an alignment with my heart's truth.
Yeah, and when you say identifying with the heart, that could mean so many things, because again, all this language is doing is pointing to something. And so in that, I would say that what you're identifying with is whatever is most sincere within you. And that sort of identification is identifying with something that is more real than the conditioning or the mental commentary. And so naturally you're getting closer and closer to the truth of what you are. But it's kind of like realizing that the heart is everything else that's real. It's like, it's not that there's your heart and then something else. There's just the truth of life. And the truth of life is your real identity, so to speak. And that identity can't be touched by the mind. And so to connect with your heart, you're not actually connecting with something called the heart. You're connecting to a deep sincerity within yourself. And we call it the heart just so that we can communicate with one another.
Yeah. I mean, the heart is an organ in our body, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems to have become the choice word.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I hear you. Oh, it's beautiful to sit in this, and I think because for me there's so much truth and freedom in these conversations, because when I can connect and understand that someone is connected to their heart, it allows a dropping of, you understand that the person you're speaking with is not in competition, is not trying to judge you, they are just wanting to, there is a curiosity that comes with it. There is just the ability to sit in the space together and be present and to flow with it. And it becomes a light and beautiful place to live. I mean, it comes the way I, going back to that, coming from love, coming for love. If it's coming from love, it's just a different energy. It's just a different energy that flows, and that's been the biggest part of my journey in so many ways. In that the first 30 years, that tick boxes, that was chasing, that was wanting, all that stuff, it was never in flow. It was always. It always needed something, and then when it was achieved, it was the next thing, and it was the next thing. And I always remember, actually, it's like I always thought I was someone who needed a lot of sleep. I always thought I needed like 8-9 hours sleep. I had to get it. I just thought I had to. And our sleep is obviously very important. But since I've come from a space where I try and choose my heart, I try and my goal is to aim to live in a space of flow, of ease, without competition, without expectation, without demands, without wants. I mean, of course, it's difficult to eradicate all those things, but to let as much of that go, to surrender into my heart, into the present moment, and to flow. I need less sleep.
Yeah,
I really do. Like, it's lighter. My world is lighter.
You have less to process.
Processing going on. It's less, thinking is draining, right?
Exactly.
It's like never switching off. It's constant.
As human beings, we want so much to be like this straight line, like this structure, so that we can get to the future. And so we develop these plans and practices that says, okay, you're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, which is essentially saying, life, I can't deal with flow right now. I need it to be this way so that I can get to the future. So I've got this morning routine and I have to do it this way. And if I can do it this way, then everything will be okay. And it's funny because it's like with sleep, it's fluid. It changes. Sometimes I'll need 2 or 3 hours of sleep and I wake up and I'm awake. Other times it'll be 8 or 10 hours. It's so like unknown. It's like 2 days ago, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I was like, okay, here we go. And then I just started working and I worked for like 16 hours, almost nonstop. And then the next day I woke up at 4:20 and I made a meme on my phone and then I was like, I'm going to go back to sleep now. And it was just like this, it's like this epic flow. And we won't follow the flow if we're holding on to identity, because, oh my God, there's so many beautiful things to explore here. It's like flow is an expression of sincerity, because you notice how your sincerity feels this way and then it feels that way. But this is a complete destroyer of what you're holding on to in the future. It's like, if you really want something in the future, it's very dangerous to be sincere. Do you see that? It's like in a relationship. Why do we not be honest? Because we don't want to lose the relationship. We want to hold on to a sense of control, and sincerity will destroy our illusion of control. And this is why we have a society that is essentially insincere or not authentic, because that destroys our illusions. And it's also why the truth of things is the most unpopular of things, because it destroys all illusions. And so, yeah, the flow, I find it so much easier to tap into when I don't have a personal agenda of getting somewhere in the future, especially in relationships. It's like if I can not have any definite outcome that says this is better than that, then I can just embrace the magic that's happening right now and fully appreciate what's showing, which is all the vulnerable stuff as well. It's like, oh, this is happening. It's not threatening anything because I don't want it to be anyway in the future. Let's just allow what's happening. And for me, that's where the magic and intimacy is, because we can fully be here in the present moment and embrace whatever shows up. Oh, so awesome.
I'm so disappointed because a girl I've been dating was listening in, and she dropped off as you're talking about that stuff. And I'm like, oh, please listen, hear all this, hear it all, because it's so beautiful, and it's in all the relationships I've had in the past, there's never been a true freedom. There's never been a true expression of truth. And it, again, I don't know what it maybe. It's the certain type of person that I am, but I find it so restrictive when I just can't share my truth. I feel tied. I feel that way.
Well, wait, why do you think you can't?
Well, in the past, I it was living in tune with my ego. It's your ego is petrified of the truth of how people will respond, what it will mean.
Yeah.
Of having to be someone. Of if you wear a mask to start with and that's how you're accepted, then you can't your ego might say you can't take that mask off because you might be judged and they might not want to be with you if they see your truth.
Exactly.
And it's draining.
Do you want to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't like you?
Preferably not, but sometimes you got to take what you can get, but no, I'm joking. But no, of course, in fact, I don't want to even hang out with someone who can't let me be me. It's that, and that it's so interesting in that so much, your world can start changing when you come from a place of self-love, of really valuing yourself, because what we're just talking about now, where you connect with your truth and you allow yourself to share your truth is deeply embedded in self-love. And if you don't love yourself and you're trying to connect with other people and you're needing them to validate you, and then you're trying to conform to fit in with them, now you're not free. Now you're and that's how I used to live. I speak about this stuff from my own experience. That's you talk about social anxiety. I used to have events in the evening that I planned that in theory I should really look forward to going to. They should be great fun. But why am I feeling anxious about them this afternoon? Why is that looming? Why is that weight on my shoulders? Because I knew I had to put on a mask to go and be someone that I didn't really want to be, and I wasn't free, and it was heavy. And sitting in a relationship like that, which I did at times, I just won't do that to myself anymore.
And you know what, man? It's so perfect. It's so perfect that all of that happens because it's a teacher that points you home.
Yeah.
Now, if we think the point of life is having a relationship, then we think something went wrong. But when you see that the point of life is coming home to the heart, then you realize it was a great success. And so in this, no relationship is a failure. It only fails to match your expectation, which is simply a misunderstanding. But to see that whatever the relationship outcome, it's perfectly designed to point me home to what I actually crave. And all of these relationship dances are simply invitations for me to play and look inward. And for me, this is what releases the grip on outcome, is understanding that relationships aren't meant to go on. That's not their function. The function of a relationship is to act like a mirror so that you can see yourself. And that's only happening in the present moment. And again, the more you see the truth of what you are, the more you clean that mirror, so to speak, then you lose any clinging to a future outcome. And then relationships become easy and effortless, but they offer zero security for the future. But that's fine, again, when you see, the nature of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is the truth of a relationship. You just don't know, but there is a trust that it will be right, whatever it is.
Yes. And then you can let go of the other person.
Yeah.
It's like it's such a disaster when you're in a relationship and you feel like you need the other person to be there in 10 years. Then they become your prisoner. You're essentially saying, don't be what you are, be what I want you to be, so that I can hide from my illusions. And I say that super compassionately, but there's a profound truth there.
Of course. Of course. And that's how I lived.
Yeah.
That's every relationship I had. You know, that's, and I think it's how a lot of people do. And this is not a sob story. You know, I think this is how we're taught to be in society. Again, no blame, but it's how things have unfolded. So it's why I'm so passionate, you know, having gone, as you say, these things are such great teachers, because having sat in the space and experienced the pain and, you know, not to blow my own trumpet, but to have experienced more flow in my life. It's like everyone deserves to experience that flow. Mm-hmm. It's the truth. And it's available to us all, you know, like you always say, all of this stuff is all inside of us. This is what we're all missing, I think. Or we're so attached to the fact that it's not, that we don't believe that it is inside of us.
Well, in your passion of kind of pointing to this in the work that you do, what is the space that you're holding for people?
Thank you for asking. It's I created a platform called Heart Space, which a lot of us would have heard of Headspace, which is about getting out of your head. And for me, Heart Space is about dropping into your heart. The way we do that is we provide a judgment-free space to allow everyone to be exactly who they are. And that's done through numerous ways. But every day I ask the community how they're feeling, how they're truly feeling, and perhaps a question around that, to allow space just for them to really, without no right or wrongs or no good or bad as to what's inside of them, but just the safety and security to express that this is where they're at. And then we go on a bit of an adventure, a bit of a journey through a personal development topic and exercise each month. So at the moment, it's around fear and getting out of your comfort zone and letting go of who you thought you were or who you think you are, and embracing actually just the freedom to express your truth. So that's, a really beautiful community that I created in November, which was born out of lockdown, actually, because we were all missing connection. And I saw some people show up through my Instagram channels, really seeking connection. You know, we were all locked away, and people coming together and joining some of my Instagram lives that I was doing. And it was like, this is beautiful, but I'd love to provide the security, the safety in private for people to actually really show up, rather than feeling conscious that people are watching who they don't necessarily want to hear this stuff. So it's all kind of authentically flowed out of this, everything that I do. It feels very aligned to my truth. It feels just a really beautiful flow of the person that I'm wanting to be and how I'm wanting to show up. There are challenges, you know, there's a lot of admin, there's a lot of left brain working out to do around it all at the moment, and starting on creating it. But, you know, that in allowing the space to sit in the space and to allow people to be vulnerable, to see them more deeply, and for them to see others more deeply. For me, I missed that for so long in my life, to be able to now lead a space to allow people to do that. It's like, okay, you know, this feels really beautiful to me.
I love hearing that, because that's exactly what I'm doing with the Inlight Connect community. Yeah. And I'm scratching my head. It's like, why do we have all these little communities? Why don't we all just get together? All the space. Because the technical stuff, I'm running the show behind the scenes, and I'm making all the content, hence, you know, some of my 16-hour work days, but I'm enjoying it at the same time. But there is such an enormous amount of energy that goes in behind the scenes to hold that space.
There's another conversation for us to have another time.
Yeah, totally. But the dynamic of the space holding, and what I love in hearing what you're saying, is that you're holding a space of non-judgment and letting arise whatever arises. And that's where the healing happens. And I think that this is so profound to recognize that we don't necessarily make healing happen. It's like, in the role that we have, you and I, we're not necessarily the one who heals. We are the space holder for people to connect with life. And then the truth of life is what heals. And so we can kind of lay down the burden of the idea that we're actually doing something important. We're just loving on people.
Don't ruin my identity.
Oh yeah, that could be another identity that we hold on to.
No, but I'm with you, and isn't it an honor? I do my lives every Monday evening, and I come off them so many times where I just think, what an honor to have been able to witness people go through that work, to just dig a little bit deeper, for them to feel safe enough to sit in that space and go through that with me. Whether it's tears or whether it's silence, whatever it is, the honor of feeling someone in that space is just beautiful work. It's beautiful, and nothing external can ever fill me up like that.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's an energy, it's an electricity inside of me. For me, I call it, connection, fundamentally. But it's an honor, and I guess where my ego kicks in is when I sit in spaces with you and I listen to you and I think, wow, I would love that depth. I'd love to be able to go to that next level that you show us.
Well, I hope that we can hang out in person, and then you'll realize that I'm not anywhere as enlightened as you think.
I find that true.
You're like, wait, this is just a normal dude.
Well, maybe you'll find that exactly the same thing,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I love about the diversity. It's like, sure, within me is a capacity to articulate these things, but again, it's just the skill set, so to speak. And then you have your own skill set that I absolutely love, which is why I invited you on the show. And so it's like there's these puzzle pieces where we're all fulfilling our role by being what we are. And I'll focus on what resonates for me, which is pointing to this thing through space and words. And then you'll do what you do, holding space and loving on people in your own way. And then that's the tree being the tree and the flower being the flower. And then somehow the miracle of life keeps going on. And so it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's really beautiful. Karen, who's sitting in the audience here, she did a retreat in Ibiza a couple of years ago, and she hears me say this the whole time. But I'm such a believer that, I hearts see hearts, and Tiger, it doesn't matter where your interests or passions lie. If I want to talk about football and you want to talk about trees, which is what bonds so much of society. When your hearts are open, none of that matters, because we're not here to talk about that. I can just feel your heart and you can feel mine, and that's our connection.
Yes.
And there's a truth in that. We don't need to have the same passions or interests. There's a connection as human beings that allow us to bond and to see each other.
Oh, I love that.
And that for me is so exciting. It doesn't matter who I'm speaking to. If you let me see you, then there's a connection to be made, and it can be beautiful.
Oh, God. That's awesome. Okay, we're going to end the podcast episode on that. We'll continue for a little bit on Clubhouse, and then I'll also keep the microphones recording, and then we can share the extra stuff with the Enlight Connect community. And that's naturally a plug and an invitation to join the community for those that are listening for some bonus content.
But if they're not sold already.
Yeah, exactly. Ben, man, just a huge hug. Thank you so much for coming on, and I could literally talk to you for hours about this miracle that we're swimming in. Where can people find you?
Oh, thank you, Tiger. Honestly, the honor is all mine. It really is.
No, it's mine, Ben. Stop.
Well, I'm not letting you have it. I want it. It's everything I do is on Instagram, really. That's plenty. But I have this name, The Naked Professor, which makes me cringe each time, because it started out as a bit of a gimmick, and now I'm like, my ego's like, no, I'm more serious than that. Don't need this name. But no, it does make me cringe a bit. But that's what it is at the moment, and that's where I do most of my stuff, I guess. Apart from here on Clubhouse too, which I love too.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you back on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic. And for everyone else listening on whatever podcast player you're listening, if you have the ability to rate and review, that would be super cool, so that the world knows that there is some love-filled content over this way. Thank you so much. I appreciate your guys' support. Till next time, aloha, and cheers to the beauty that you already are. You've been listening to an Enlight Connect audio experience. We hope you've enjoyed this journey. If so, let us know. We deeply appreciate all feedback, comments, and reviews. Learn more at inlightconnect.com.